Hello, I'm Judith A. Yates, true crime author and criminologist. This is Best True Crime. Every episode, I take you on a journey to explore crime, forensics, and investigations. Hey everyone, today I am taking you to 124 Abercorn Street in Savannah, Georgia. This is the Owens Thomas House and slave quarters. I had some very strange experiences here, but I just want to show you the slave quarters portion of the house. Savannah is a port town, which means it could easily receive transnational shipping, importing, and exporting. Importing include enslaved people. Savannah settled in 1733. The colony of the province of Georgia had banned slavery in 1735. Of all the 13 colonies, it was the only colony to ban slavery. But slaves were brought from South Carolina openly and sold by the late 1700s. Slavery was finally legalized in Georgia in 1750. To understand this piece of history, we have to know from where these people came. From 1755 to 1767, 63% enslaved people came from the Caribbean. 24% came directly from Africa's coast. Now that changed about 1768 to 1771 because 86% of enslaved people imported into Savannah originated from Africa. And in 1798, Georgia legislature banned the slave trade from Africa. Now, Georgian slavery was not just an agricultural institution. Slave labor was utilized in plantation fields, raising and tending to cash crops. That includes tobacco, cotton, and rice. But once harvest season finished for the year, and only with a master's approval, rural slaves with trade skills were hired out to labor temporarily in towns and urban areas until the next season. This included blacksmiths, carpenters, builders, mechanics. Many skills were needed in the city. Slaves also toiled on ships as cooks, fishermen, and general labor. History tells us that about 400,000 people, 10% of the South slaves' population, lived in urban areas. A large percentage of southern towns were built with slave labor, and female slaves were given the task of cooking, cleaning, washing, tending gardens, raising the children of their white masters, and any labor needed to run a successful home. These enslaved people were housed either in separate buildings or a section of the house reserved only for the slaves, and always separated from the white owners. One such house exists today at 124 Abercorn Street in Savannah, Georgia. Architect William J. of Bath, England designed this house. Construction began in 1860 and it was completed in 1819. In 1830, the mansion was purchased by a local attorney and politician named George Welshman Owens. And in 1951, the house was donated to the Telfair Academy of Arts and Sciences as the South's oldest art museum. Now, the carriage house was under renovation in the 1990s, and this is when an amazing discovery was made. One of the oldest and best preserved urban slave quarters in the American South was discovered at the Owens Thomas House. Today, the Historic House Museum is called the Owens Thomas House and Slave Quarters. It is operated by Telfair Museums. In September 2021, I visited the house. Now, I didn't take the regular tour or marvel at the architecture or furnishings or ooh and ah, everything where it was lived in and ran by the white owners. I went to the slave quarters. I also visited the kitchen, washroom, and ice house, all areas operated by slave labor. It is impossible to experience the events that occurred during that time period, so a modern tour will just have to do. Hey everybody, I'm Judith Yates, and what we're going to do right now is we're going to tour the slave quarters of this house because I personally think that's the most important part. We're going to go into the door here, that's part of the tour, and see where they lived, cooked, ate, and survived. Come on, let's go.
So the slave quarters is one of the earlier constructions on the site. It had not only the mansion over on the far side of the property, but the slave quarters itself shares a building with the carriage house. So as you can see right here in the cross section, the one structure divided right down the middle. On the southern side of the house, you would have had a set of horse stables, storage for the family carriage, and a hayloft up above. Then just right through a thin little wall, you had the slave quarters on the northern side. And the slave quarters would have housed at any given time about 9 to 11 people. Of those 9 to 11, they would have been housed in a set of just about 5 rooms in the slave quarters. 1 room on the first story, and the upper story would have been subdivided into 4 additional rooms. There was 1 communal living space, which is where we're currently located. And if you look around here, you can see it was fairly spartan, all things considered. Fireplace that they could use for heating, cooking, cleaning, and that's about it. Now, the enslaved workers would have generally been using well water as opposed to any of the cistern-based water inside the house. And they did personalize their space just a little bit. As you're looking up here, you can see traces of the haint blue paint. Haint blue is a color that stems from West African tradition, where the belief was that spirits couldn't pass over water. And so by painting blue surfaces on porches, undersides of floors, and so on, they believed that they were helping to ward away evil spirits and protect themselves. The color comes from an indigo mixture and was used pretty frequently in southeastern African American communities.
Now, are these the original floors?
You can usually tell where the original floorboards are.
Oh, I see.
So these older looking ones, the ones that look like they've got some wear and tear to them. In other areas, there were at least repair work done as well.
So my tour guide tells me that these stairs were not built until the 20th century, so they weren't here during this time. We're going to go upstairs. So this is the actual area where those stairs would have come up. Very tight-fitting space. Certainly not like the stairs in the actual mansion. And this that you're looking at is the original flooring. If you look closely at the nails, you see the handiwork that went into this flooring, or rather, not the handiwork, because right next to the slave quarters was the stables for 2 to 3 horses, and on the second floor, the hayloft. Secondary fireplace. Obviously the same location as the other one. Now, I want you to think about how many people were kept here. They didn't live here, they were kept here in this smallest space. And we're going to just walk across here to one of the beds. At least on this side of the house, there's stonework. And on the other side of that wall would be the quarters. From 6 to 12 enslaved people lived in these slave quarters at any given time from 1819 until 1985. Half were children, but of course they were expected to work as well. Some slept in the main house. And there's a woman named Emma, a nursemaid, who slept in the children's room constantly on call. And then Diane, the cook, might have slept in the kitchen or an adjoining room in the basement. Now, these people worked literally before sunup to sundown. Some might have worked sundown and on. Historians can't determine when any of the enslaved people were related. Not much information on them, obviously. Some of the slaves received furnishings from the families, either handed down or distributed. Others made their own. So, judging by the handiwork of this bed, something like this would have most likely been handed down. I'm going to read to you a slave narrative here in the museum. There was a bed in each corner of the room, and from 1 to 3 children slept in the bed with their parents. The rest of the children slept on the floor. The tall, old, homemade wooden beds had very much the appearance of beds used now, except that cords were used instead of metal springs. Now, they were mattresses stuffed with hay or rags and mattress ticks. I'm sorry, that's not a mess. Let's try this again. The mattresses on these beds were filled with straw, no pillows. Sheets was boiled with homemade soap that kept them white, snow white. Other folks put quilts over the straw. Now, planks were laid crossways and straw put on them, and the bed was covered with the whitest sheets you ever seen, and some made pallets on the floor. The beds were made on the same order as a box. The way they made them was like this. They took 4 strips of narrow wood, each one of them about a foot wide, and then they nailed them together so they were in the shape of a square. Then they nailed the bottom onto the square shape. The bottom was called the slats. When this was finished, they set the box on some legs to keep it off the floor, and then they got busy with the mattress. Old oat sacks filled them with straw and hay, put this on the box and slept with it. Everyone had a hard time sleeping. So I'm going to step back so you can see the actual size of this room. Think about the winters, think about the rain, think about the drafts, and the very hot summers. I can tell you the humidity is terrible here. I came here specifically to just see the slave quarters. I really didn't have much of an interest in seeing the rest of the house. And I'm feeling this very strange, like a short breathness here. And it started when I'm downstairs and I'm looking at the original floors. I'm thinking about the feet that walked there. I'm looking at the original fireplace. I'm thinking about the people that lived here, cooked here, survived here. Don't let anybody tell you that somebody treated their slaves well or didn't treat them well. A slave is a slave. They could not vote. They could be sold off like furniture at any given moment, which means a woman could lose her child, a husband could lose his wife, sisters, brothers could be parted out. These people weren't considered people. They were considered less than animals. And I'm feeling this weird, I don't even know how to explain it. It's a very claustrophobic feeling, and it's not because of the space. It's just a feeling that I have when I'm in this actual space. This has got to be one of the most effective tours that I've ever taken. And again, it's because it's very hard to breathe here. Obviously, the original furniture isn't here much, but the furniture that is like the original furniture is placed here. And the flooring, you rest assured there probably weren't that nice of a windows. But the feeling here is very claustrophobic, and you see people coming in and out, just kind of looking, listening to their guided audio tour. I really can't breathe in this room. It's just, I gotta get out of here. But if you get a chance, definitely come to Savannah. Definitely come and see these rooms, and don't just look at them, but think about the people that were kept here against their will. After I took a breath and felt better, I walked down to the scullery. Now, according to the tour, this room served as the scullery, a place for tasks involving water. Unlike modern kitchens, historical kitchens did not include a sink, even in homes that had indoor plumbing. Enslaved women washed pots and pans, prepped vegetables, and cleaned laundry in the scullery. History tells us that this room is the original room for the property, and Diane, the enslaved cook for the Owens family, spent the majority of her time in this space. Now, who was Diane? She was just another enslaved individual. But with the help of other women and girls, she prepared meals for the Owens family and the enslaved household. That would be a total of 12 to 22 people every day, all day long. Now, Diane worked from sun up into the night, and it is likely she slept in the basement near the kitchen rather than the slave quarters. She could fix rice, cornbread, both appearing on both tables, but for the owners of the house, owners of the slave, meat, fish, vegetables, fruits, desserts. The lesser cuts of meat were added to the meals downstairs for the slaves. And word has it, that's where barbecue comes from, because they had the lesser portions of ghosts. Let's try this again. The slaves would get the lesser portions of the meat, and they would have to spice them up and add sauce and what have you to make them edible. So word is that that's where barbecue came from. There's also an argument that it came from the Caribbean for the same reason.
The parlor being rounded through some architectural tricks here. That includes the crenellations that you see in the ceiling, but also this round key pattern and the sky motif that they have on the ceiling, making it feel like it's a domed room.
So that was the experience at the Owen Thomas House and Slave Quarters. If you just see the opulence of how these people lived versus how the people that slaved for them lived, it just puts a very strange feeling inside of you of what it was like to be there. All right, let's go look at the rest of Savannah and join me. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Best True Crime. I'm Judith A. Yates, and I hope you subscribe. Be sure to visit truecrimebook.net and be safe out there.